So you're going through your day as a creative entrepreneur and you're just feeling overwhelmed by all the tasks you have to keep up with, all the projects you're trying to move forward, and you're just feeling like you're losing all of your great ideas and everything's going right out the window. If that sounds at all relatable, then this episode is for you. Today, we are getting the great privilege of having a conversation with Carl Pullein. Carl is the author of Your Time, Your Way, which was released in the middle of last year, and he has been voted the #1 time management guru since 2023. I've been following Carl for some time now and have taken his free COD course, Collect, Organize, and Do, and it's been transformative in the way that I work. Now, I will readily admit that I'm still practicing the last letter in that acronym, DO. I've gotten really good, thanks to Carl and his class, about how to collect and organize my tasks that I would like to capture. I can say that I don't feel like I've lost ideas. I don't feel like that part is missing for me anymore. The part that I am eager to continue to develop is the doing part. And Carl sheds some great light on that in today's episode. So if this at all sounds like something you've struggled with or something that would be beneficial for you, I invite you to take a moment here, take some time here with Carl and I as we have this conversation. And if you're new here to the conversation, my name is Caleb, and I want to welcome you to the podcaster's journey. My mission with this podcast is to help you as podcasters and creative entrepreneurs just be able to be more sustainable and just give you an open look into the things that I'm going through and give you ways, if I'm doing something wrong, to show you a way to do it better. This is a journey that I'm on, and so I know that I'm going to make many mistakes. Also happy to share the things that I'm doing well as well, but by far there will be more lessons to learn here than tell you about things that I'm doing successful. So with that out of the way, let's jump into this conversation with Carl. All right. Well, thank you for jumping on, Carl. I've been looking forward to this conversation, and I'll be honest, this was just kind of a shot in the dark. I was like, you know what? I've really enjoyed Carl's content, and I should just reach out to him and see if this would be a good fit. So thank you for coming on and being willing to come on.
Thank you for inviting me.
Yeah. So let's start, Carl, with some of your background. I was reading around on your website a little bit, on your blog, and you've done a post there about some of your history and what it was that got you into time management. And that's what we're talking about today, is how to move from chaos into control with our time, especially as creative entrepreneurs. You've had a diverse career and a diverse set of life experiences. I'm just wondering if you could share a little bit of that journey and how that's led you to becoming more interested in time management. Because I know with a title such as the #1 time guru since 2023, there's got to be a big journey and a big story behind that.
There is actually a bit of a journey, and obviously when you go on a journey, you're not really aware of it at the time. But my time management journey really started when I was in middle school. In the UK, we called them O-levels. They call them GCSEs now, but I'm old enough. They were O-levels when I was at school, and no computers, obviously, in those days. So it was A4 bits of paper, and I would draw out these revision timetables for my exams. I loved it. It was brilliant. I was absolutely terrible at actually doing the revision, but doing the timetables, that was my game. I loved that bit. So when I think back to where it all started, I think, well, that's really where it all started. Managing how I was going to organize my revision time, if you like. But then when I got into the working world, I was very fortunate that one of my first jobs was in hotel management, and time management is more a case of, this conference starts at 9 a.m., everything has to be ready by then, and you worked through the night. I mean, I got used to that bit. But my real, everyday time management came about when I started selling cars in early 1990s, and I was very fortunate that my first boss was probably one of the most organized people I've ever met, even to this day. And he introduced me to this absolutely gorgeous leather-bound diary that we had on our desks. I remember driving across to the other side of the country to go and buy one. Now, I come from the UK, so driving across to the other side of the country is probably just like in the US, it's like going to the next town. But it was a 2-hour drive to buy one of these things, got home and got it all set up. And that was like one of my first experiences in the working world. So it's time management and organizing my day has been a big part of my life all the way through. And then I got into the Franklin Planner about mid-1990s and used one of those right up until 2009. And I read David Allen's book, Getting Things Done, just as about the time I got my first iPhone, which was like 2009. And I was thinking, surely this can be done digitally. And sure enough, I mean, it wasn't great in the early days, but it was doable. And then obviously from about 2015, I would guess, there's just been an explosion in productivity and time management tools. And I've been using those right up until about the beginning of last year when I went, whoa, hang on a minute. This technology is great. It really does make things probably quite a lot easier. But the human side has gone. That actual sitting down and on a sofa at the end of the day with a planner of some sort and just planning out the day with pen and paper so you're not looking at a screen. And so I've kind of pulled back a little bit from digital. I mean, digital calendars, you can't beat them. They're brilliant. But to-do lists and planning, where there's a lot more thinking, that's where I've kind of moved away from tech and moved back towards pen and paper. Because although there are studies, there's particularly one that came out from Tokyo University in 2014 about technology, typing, and handwriting. When it comes to thinking, you are much better off using pen and paper. And so it's been a wonderful journey, and it will never stop because it's always changing. And now, of course, AI. The issue with AI at the moment is it can't predict the future. So it's a little bit more difficult in the productivity world, but it can save us time with other stuff, of course.
Yeah, I had a question. I didn't know if we'd touch on AI, but I was curious to know your thoughts on things like Motion and different AI tools like that.
Well, I hope nobody's watching from Motion or listening, because I did actually have a play with Motion because I was curious about it, and I followed the setup guides and everything, and then I just let it go, and it looked at my calendar and said, "Oh, you're very busy on that day, so you must do exercise at 6 a.m." I'm going, I'm not doing exercise at 6 a.m. So the problem, again, it's one of those problems. Is AI is. On paper, it all sounds great, and it is. The trouble is we are human beings, and I have no idea when I go to bed tonight if I'm going to sleep well. I have no idea when I wake up tomorrow morning if I have a fight with my wife, although we've been married long enough, we very rarely fight now. But also, I traveled to Europe for Christmas, and when I came back, I've got jet lag, I got the flu, and then we got this stomach bug that was going around. I mean, I had everything for the first 2 weeks back. Motion app would be telling me, no, you've got to do this. No, you've got to do this. And I'm going, I just do not feel well. And that's the problem at the moment with AI is it doesn't know how you feel. It's just looking at data and saying, oh, you can do that here. And oh, you can do that there. And as human beings, that's not really how we work. So, but that doesn't mean to say that it's not going to get better. People wear Apple Watches and smart watches. They can tell what your blood pressure is like or something like that. So theoretically, in the future, there's every reason to believe that AI and that kind of technology is going to really help us, because it'll sort of say, you're not actually at your best. You didn't sleep well last night. I am going to cut down your tasks. That would be nice, but I think we're a long way from that at the moment.
Yeah, I resonate with that. It leaves out the human element and treats us as a machine and keeps driving us forward.
So that's my reservation at the moment. But as I say, I haven't written it off. I know that as the technology gets better, and as I say, technology, wearable devices means that theoretically in the future, there's no reason why it can guide us. But the other side of it is I really wouldn't want a machine telling me what to do.
I like that perspective as well. Just listening to your journey and how it started for you with pen and paper and the various methods that you've gone through before you got to digital, it makes me reflect on my own, where I'm much younger than you, and I've kind of come of age going to college and purchasing my first iPhone when I'm in college. So I've kind of been on the digital side from the get-go when it comes to, well, maybe not from the get-go, I had grade school and everything, but when I started to care about trying to push projects ahead and keep track of them myself, it was all digital. And so listening to you talk about AI and how it's pushing you kind of as a machine and taking out the human element, I'm reflecting on my own, and I'm like, I think I do that to myself without, even having an AI telling me what to do. I already treat myself like a human, and maybe that's because of growing up just with machines, trying to keep track of all this stuff rather than sitting there and thinking through everything like you're talking about.
I mean, this is totally not scientific, but I have a nephew and a niece who are very, very young. I think my niece is 3 years old and my nephew's 5. And over last summer they visited, and I know my nephew absolutely adores his iPad. I mean, screens. And that okay. And I thought, can I do an experiment? And I got some colored pens and some like copy paper and put it on the dining table. And I said, just let them play on there. And I wish I'd put an iPad on the table as well, because I would have been curious where it would have gone. But it was just the paper and the pens. And, for 45 minutes, they had pure joy just drawing. I mean, they're not able to write as in legible handwriting that we know, but they were drawing and they were showing their mum and everything. And I'm going, that to me, I started to feel this, it's an inbuilt instinct to draw, to make something, to create. That I think that's a human part that everyone shares. I know people say I'm not creative or I am creative. We've all got that in us. It's there. And
Yeah.
I was never good at art. I'm still not very good at drawing on art, but I do like creating shapes with handwriting. And that actually connects to a different part of your brain. When you're typing, and most people will probably recognize this, when you're typing, even if you're quickly making notes, you start editing. Because, I mean, the computer doesn't help you because it draws a red line if you made a spelling error, a green line if it's grammatically incorrect. And I know you can turn those off, but not many people do that. So what you're doing is you're kind of editing as you're going through. And with pen and paper, you don't care about the spelling mistakes or the grammar errors. You just, and there's a motion involved as well. And I'm not a scientist. I haven't done any, but there are studies I know out there that are now looking into this. When it comes to like thinking and being creative, you're much more likely to be better off using pen and paper than you would be trying to do it on a screen.
Yeah, that's interesting and fascinating. And I definitely can see that where I just go into editing mode instead of allowing myself the creative space just to continue to brain dump.
That's why mind mapping on paper is still, a lot of people do that because it doesn't matter if you're making spelling errors. As long as you can read it, that's all that matters.
Yeah, just get it out.
Yeah.
Well, moving on with some of your story, Carl, I'm curious, living as a UK native residing in South Korea, has immersing yourself in that culture shaped your perspective on productivity and time management in any way that's notable?
I think in many ways it has. I mean, it's been 23 years now, so it's kind of like Korea feels like home and the UK feels like a foreign country when I go there now.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing I remember when I arrived here in Korea was like Korea knows how to get things done. And there's an interesting one going on at the moment. The UK is building a high-speed train link between the south and the north. It's called HS2. It's costing billions and billions and billions of dollars. It's currently over. I don't think they've actually laid any track yet. And Korea, in the town that I live now, the city that I live, they've just built an express train line between my city and the south, a place called Busan. 2 years. And HS2 in the UK, I mean, I say they haven't laid any track. They've been talking about it for 15 years. They've spent billions of dollars on it, and there's still nothing there. And I was really surprised because in Korea, it was open just before Christmas. And I was going...
And is that a comparable length track?
Actually, the Korean one is longer.
Oh, my word. Wow.
And I just thought, but that's always been something that I've noticed about Korea. I remember going, because I came here to teach English when I first arrived here. I remember walking to the language school one day, and there was some bulldozers and trucks all parked outside this old apartment building. 3 hours later, I walk past and the whole building's gone. I think, what? And then like 3 months later, there's a new apartment building in its place. And that's the thing that's always struck me about Korea is once they start something, it's done, and it's done very quickly.
Wow.
And just coming from a European country or from a Western country where they've overcomplicated like building regulations and everything else. I mean, buildings here are safe. They're not, ignoring them, but it's just become an overcomplicated mess. And that something from a time management and productivity perspective is, again, is the human side of us is to overcomplicate things. And in Korea, I just love the idea that they say, right, we're going to do this. Done. I just love that.
Wow, that's amazing. So just a more simple approach, just like let's streamline it and let's just get it done.
It's like, how do we get from A to B in the quickest time possible?
Since you've lived there for 23 years, do you know some of the history or the backstory of what's developed that culture there in Korea?
Well, it's partly the Confucius. Most northern Asian and just to a large extent southern Asian countries have this Confucian philosophy, I suppose you can call it, which is very hierarchical. Certainly in terms of like what was or maybe still going on in Western countries with culture wars, it's not compatible with that at all because it's still like, it's not really male. I've seen the change. It used to be very male dominated. Now there's many females who are in leadership positions now. But even if you look at the Samsung board of directors, which is Korea's biggest company, you won't find any females. You might find some, but they're likely to be connected to the family. It's still there, but probably not as bad as it was 23 years ago. But that hierarchical structure comes from Confucianism. And there's also a deference and a respect for the position. So if you are like the manager or you're the chairman or the CEO, there's an automatic deference to them, respect, because there's a respect for the position. Now, growing up in the UK, I was always taught, if you're promoted to a leadership role, you have to earn the respect. And that was something that I found very different because here, you could have an incompetent manager, but because they are the manager, you respected them. And, my background was more, no, if they're incompetent, and I don't respect you. That was something that's Confucianism because of hierarchy. You tend to follow that. But those are the biggest difference. And again, this will be happening in Japan. This will happen largely in China as well. There is that automatic deference and respect for positions of leadership. And it goes down into the family as well.
That's fascinating. So as you're moving into your systems of time management with the development of the COD system and the time sector, which one came first?
COD came first because that was actually, again, going back to that bit about we have a habit as human beings, we just have a habit of overcomplicating things. Going right back to like 2015, I'd noticed that it was just becoming very, very complicated. And you think, well, hang on, what are the basic principles here? What do we really need to be aware of? And that's why it came first. I just kind of stripped everything back and said, well, really, we just got to collect something. Whatever we collect, we need to organize it somewhere, and then we got to do it.
So as that was developing, what inspired you to create the COD system?
Well, I have an allergy to complexity. Yeah, my brain just turns to jelly. Anything that starts to get complicated, my brain turns to jelly. I think I understand now what's happening is we have different types of people. Some people love the detail, and I just no. No, I'm more of these people that look, where are we and where do we need to be, and what's the fastest approach. So I tend to stay above that complexity line, and that's really where the inspiration came from it, because I could see things were just getting more and more complicated. And I'm going, oh, just no, not for me. And then that's when I said, right, we got to get back to basic principles here. What's important? What do we need to collect? What do we need to do with what we've collected? And then when are we going to do it?
So was there a book or a resource that you kind of ran into that was like, hey, this is going to help me kind of start formulating this organization, or this was something just through your life you were like, I'm going to start doing it in this manner?
This came from my kind of life experiences. The first book I read on time management was The 10 Natural Laws of Time and Life Management by Hiram Smith.
Okay.
He was the creator of the Franklin Planner. That was kind of the first time management book I read. And I mean, obviously, I've read tons of books on time management. The two that stood out was that one and Getting Things Done by David Allen. And actually, the interesting difference between the two is like the Franklin Planner, Natural Laws of Time and Life Management book is more about, okay, we've got to get structured. And this is actually also in the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You know, Stephen Covey also isolated this, which like daily planning, weekly planning, and being a little bit more structured and aware of what's on your calendar, how much time do you have left? That's the time you've got available for doing your tasks. And actually through the 1990s, there were tons of time management courses that companies sent people on. It was a huge business. And somehow in the 2000s, it all sort of like disappeared. I didn't see many companies offering time management courses anymore. And Getting Things Done was published in 2001. And Getting Things Done is a much more flexible, less structured system. And it works brilliantly up until about 2015 when technology really took off. And now we got so many inputs that everyone was just saying, oh, I'm overwhelmed. I'm completely overwhelmed. And it's largely because GTD is more about, Getting Things Done just called GTD, and largely because it's just about creating lists based around the tools that you have, where you are, office or home or whatever, and people. In the early 2000s, that's great. It was manageable. But from about I'd say about 2015, it just started to become unmanageable because there's so many inputs. So this is really where the start of COD came from, was looking at both of those and trying to say, well, okay, where's the middle ground here? And what's simple that anyone could just pick up and do?
That's great. So how long has this system been in play for you and you've been teaching it?
I probably would say 2016. So it's about, getting on for 9 years now.
That's awesome. Is there any story around the development of that and kind of the refining and the reiterating of that, or it kind of came out as collect, organize, and do?
There wasn't really a story around that. It was just like the name, because I realized that cod is a fish.
Okay.
But then I thought, well, okay, that's going to help make people memorize it a lot better.
Yeah. Are you a fisher?
No.
Do you enjoy fishing? No, you don't.
But in England, fish and chips is a very famous dish, and the best fish for it is cod or haddock. So
okay.
But I was very aware when I looked at I say, okay, what do I name this? And I said, oh, look, that's cod. And then I go, okay, that's a fish. And there was a little bit of a debate as to whether I should I use it? And I thought, well, no, because it's easy to remember.
Yeah. No, that's great. I mean, it could be that I'm a vegetarian and it's just lost on me that way, and I'm not a fisher. So I that's the first time I've connected those two. So that's a fun tidbit on that.
So that was something I was aware of. How do I name this? And then I thought, well, let's keep this simple: collect, organize, and do. Oh, cod.
That's great. Did you have any other runner-up for names, or that was?
No, not really, because I was more focused on the system than thinking about the name.
Yeah.
It's like the name was the afterthought, and what do I do now?
Yeah.
But then, with Tony Robbins, he's got this program called Unleash the Power Within, but everybody who knows about it just calls it UPW. And as I say, Getting Things Done, the book by David Allen, everyone just calls it GTD. So I realize it's just letters and acronyms are generally the way to go.
Yeah. It's a common practice within this realm. So As it evolved, as you started to evolve the time sector system, I'm not as familiar with that system, but I was reading through your website and came across that as well. What is the beauty of the time sector system,
Well, that
and
one
how
has
does that
been,
kind of play in with
yeah,
the
so that
clock
one
system?
really was a little bit more, well, not complex, but a little bit more detailed, because collect, organize, and do is very simple, but it gave people a lot of freedom as to how they organize stuff. Now, I'm very aware that human beings, we're all different. What works for me isn't necessarily going to work for other people. But one thing that started to crop up for me was that we've always had this time limitation of 24 hours a day. Everyone has it. It's the same for everyone. It's the one side of the equation that you cannot change. It's fixed. Last year I read Walter Isaacson's Leonardo da Vinci biography, and he had it. He had that time limitation. He was the world's worst procrastinator. If you
Wow.
just read the book, that's why actually he never really finished. I think he only ever finished 5 paintings. The rest of them are all unfinished.
Did he really? Wow.
But the one thing that we've all got is this time limitation. And
Hmm.
I thought, well, okay, that's good, because in the world of mathematics, although I'm never any good at mathematics, if you've got a fixed point, that does give you something solid. And 24 hours is your fixed point. And so, again, I think now looking back, I realize this comes back to the Franklin Planner, because they have a daily planning system, which is look at your appointments and commitments for the day. How much time do you have left? That's all you've got to do your tasks. So if you've got 6 hours of meetings and you work an 8-hour day, you've only got 2 hours to do tasks. But you're going to be interrupted. You're going to be distracted by something else. So really, you've probably only got 45 minutes to do tasks. That's all you've got. So there's no point in having a list of 50 things to do today, because it is not going to happen. Unless you
Yeah.
cancel meetings or work 24 hours, which isn't advisable. So that was where that I realized that really productivity and time management is really about allocating what you need to do in the time that you have available. And so I call this time-based productivity rather than task-based productivity, which is where we were getting to in around about 2015. It was all about the tasks. Trouble is with tasks, you have no control over what's going to come in. Now, I clear my email inbox every morning, and I have no idea how many emails are going to be in there. It could be 85, it could be 185. I just have no control over that side of it. But I do have control over how much time I spend doing email today. And that's where the time sector system came from. So, okay, we've got these 24 hours a day. What needs to be done this week? What can be left until next week or the week or this month or next month or further out, long term? So that's really where the time sector came from, was just that realization that on two sides of the equation, one side is fixed, that's time. The other side, the tasks, what you have to do, that's variable. And that's where you have a bit more control.
Yeah.
Although some people argue they have no control, but you do. You can say no.
That's true. That's true. That's a definite skill that a lot of us need to learn. That's a skill that I've definitely been trying to acquire and grow stronger in over the last year. So what would you say to somebody who's struggling with that mindset of the task-oriented productivity? I'd say that's kind of where I've fallen into, and I'm trying to develop this idea of the fixed time, like this is what I have time available for. Let's try to see what tasks we can try to fit in there, and what we don't get done, we'll pass on to another day. How do you try to develop that kind of mindset to move from task to time?
Well, if we take email as a good example, let's say out of 150 emails, 75 are I don't need to do anything with. I can delete or archive. That leaves 75 emails that I have to do something with. To me, they are the ones that I need to act on. So I only need about an hour a day to do my email, actionable email. So I have an hour protected, usually about 4 p.m. each day for doing email. Now, the idea behind this, though, is that, well, if I don't do it today, I'm going to need 2 hours tomorrow. And if I don't do it tomorrow, I'm going to need 3 hours on Wednesday or the day after. I haven't got 3 hours any day to sit down and just do email. So I would rather spend an hour each day and protect that time just to do as many as I can. But what you find is when you get consistent with that, by the end of the week, you don't really have any backlogs at all. I mean, there may be a few emails that you haven't managed to get to, but there is a little trick here. You reverse the order of the email that you're responding to. So the oldest is at the top and the newest is at the bottom. So any email that came in, say, an hour ago, there's no pressure on me to reply. But emails that came in yesterday afternoon, there's a little bit of pressure for me to reply. So they will be at the top. And the ones that only came in this morning will be at the bottom. So I've got an hour.
And that's a setting.
I start at the top and just work my way down.
And that's a setting that you can do in your inbox, correct?
It
Where
is.
You could flip it so that it's viewed.
Yeah, you can reverse the order. So if you're using Apple Mail, you can reverse the order. If you're using Outlook, you can reverse the order. Most third-party apps will allow you to do it. Unfortunately, Gmail doesn't allow you to do it. So if you're using the Gmail interface, you basically just have to start at the bottom and go up.
That's fascinating. I've never thought about doing it that way, but I can see how that would be very beneficial.
Now I don't feel under pressure if I don't finish all my email today, for example, because I know that the ones that I didn't get to came in later in the day, and they'll be the first I deal with tomorrow when I sit down and do my actionable email. Now there's a little bit of also I know because some people push back on this. I've got to reply to my email. This is one of those ones where, hang on a minute, we've got to start drawing some kind of rules here. If it's urgent, my classic example is, if your house is probably not the right analogy today, but if your house is on fire, your neighbor is not going to email you and tell you. They're going to call you, or at the very least text you. And that should be our approach to email. If something is urgent, it's not going to be an email. It's going to be a phone call or a WhatsApp message or a text message or whatever. And if you start allowing, if you respond to email too fast, what you're doing is you're setting an expectation that people are now going to say, oh, they reply to their emails within minutes. So now the people emailing you are treating email as an instant messaging service. And you really don't want that.
That's great. That's awesome advice. To take this a step further, I'm thinking of if I've got a research for a project coming up or something like that, I tend to be somebody who likes to really dive in with one topic and kind of work on it until it's done, rather than allot the time and say, okay, we've done enough and we need to move on to the next thing. That tends to be my problem, or a project that I've allotted time for. I guess that would be like email, so we won't go there. But researching, how do you move away from that kind of a mindset where you develop a mindset where you're just sitting down to do just a bite-sized chunk, rather than trying to eat the elephant one bite at a time, rather than trying to eat the whole elephant when you sit down?
I think for me, it's research is an interesting one, because I know, like you say, it's not something that I say, I've only got an hour to research this. I tend to push those off to the afternoon, where I keep my calendar reasonably flexible. So I have that little bit more of time available to do that sort of thing. I would never do that sort of thing in the morning. That's what I call my creative time. So I would normally be recording something or writing something. But the afternoons would be when I do the research, or even into the evening, because it's, to me, it could be reading a book, it could be watching a video or something like that to part of the research. And I can do that in the evening. I don't have those kind of barriers saying, work, stop, family, start. That doesn't really work anyway. And it's quite nice to be able to just sit on the sofa and do my research that way in the evening. I know some people prefer to have barriers between that sort of thing. That's fine. But then you've got to find the time within your working time if that's what you choose to do. I'm perfectly happy doing research in the evening. So, and that's why it's a little bit more open in the evening as well.
I like that. As you said, work stop, family time start kind of thing. That brought to mind the idea of work-life balance. How does that kind of resonate with you, or how have you dealt with that in your career? And
well, I've thought about this for many, many, many years, and I don't think it really actually exists, because the problem with family time is that you're now involving another human being. And I mean, the classic example is people with young children today, they'll say, oh, I really want to be able to spend time with my daughter or my son or whatever and play with them and everything like that. And I say, that's absolutely great, but you wait till their 13th birthday. They're going to hate you. They're not going to want to spend any time with you. And then for the next 4 years, it's going to be hell because they're going to hate you. And you're old and they won't want to talk to you because they're teenagers and they're hip and trained. And if you're forcing, that onto a teenager, you're going to have a lot of fights. So this family time, and the other one is like, even with like, say with my wife, who's not a teenager, fortunately. She thinks I am, my mentality is, but the thing, if I say, right, it's family time, but that's okay for me, but what about her calendar? What does she want to do? She might want to go off to one of her classes, or she may want to go out with some of her friends. I have no right to tell her, no. It's family time. You must sit down and do it. So once you involve another human being, the problem you have now is you can't really dictate to them that this is family time because your calendar says so. What I think in terms, though, is that it's more a case of being available. And so if you have a home office, for example, and you sort of say 7 p.m. is family time, that just means that you now need to be in the communal area of your home. You need to be available for them. If your son or daughter wants to watch a movie, then even if you hate that movie, just watch it with them. Or perhaps you can read while they're watching that movie, but just be available. That to me is like family time. My wife and I actually do have a couple of things that we've agreed. Saturday night is always family dinner. She's at university, so she has dinners at weird times of the day. She went back to university to do physiotherapy, which I'm very grateful to, because as I get older, I'm probably going to need that.
There you go.
But so she's got all sorts of studying to do, and she likes to go to a study cafe and stuff. But we do have this rule: Saturday night is family time. And what that just means is we always have dinner together. And like last Saturday, we watched these, like we always have dinner together. And like last Saturday, need to have dinner together. And like Wednesday afternoons, we do a family walk. So all of us go out for a walk somewhere.
That's fantastic.
So we have our quality time. And of course, we're talking because, we live in the same house. We're talking all the time. And it's quite often we'll have breakfast together or dinners together because we're just in the same place. But there's no expectation of it.
That's great. As an entrepreneur, I really struggle to, somebody that's self-employed, it's got big dreams and lots of stuff that they're trying to accomplish. I struggle to shut down work at an appropriate time and save time for the rest of life, essentially. I find myself just kind of working things away because that carrot's hanging there. I'm like, if I do just a little more work tonight, then I'm a little ahead tomorrow. Then I get tomorrow and it's the same story. And maybe that's been something you've dealt with. I don't know, but if it has been, is that something you've been able to overcome? And how do you balance that?
I do have it. I have what I call the entrepreneurial mind. It never stops. The thing is, do you really want to shut that off? Because that's what makes you the entrepreneur you are. I've only ever worked a 9-to-5 job for about 2 years. And I can tell you now, it's not for me. I just felt like a prisoner. The nice thing about the 9-to-5 job was by the time I'd got the bus back home, I had completely forgotten about work, which was nice. But that was because whatever work I did, it didn't really affect me. I was just getting a salary at the end of the month anyway. Now it's a lot different because now, doing that extra 30 minutes tonight could be the difference between earning $200 and $2,000. And as an entrepreneur, income is something you've got to watch. When you're salaried, you don't really have to watch the income so much because it just comes in every month on the same day. As an entrepreneur or anyone self-employed, looking at your income is because it's up and down. I had a meeting with my accountant last week and we were just talking about the summer slow months. I said, yeah, but I have to prepare for that because I know that July, August and September income will drop. My business really took off just before the pandemic. 2019, my business took off. Then the pandemic hit. I wasn't really aware of this summer slump because nobody was going on vacation in July, August, September. And 2022 was the first year sales suddenly dropped in July. And I'm going, what's going on? And then I was just going through Facebook one evening. I'm going, hang on a minute. Everyone's by the side of a pool or a beach. No wonder.
Yeah.
And so now I'm very aware of it, but now I do prepare. But so entrepreneurs have that issue to deal with that salaried workers generally don't. But what it means is that you can fight it. You can shut yourself down if you want, but it does make you feel restless, and you're not going to be very communicative with your family because your brain is somewhere else. And he's like, no, I'm not working. I'm sitting in front of the TV. I'm not working. But you are, because your brain will not shut down. You've just got the entrepreneurial mind. I mean, again, what you can do is just pick up a notebook and just write out whatever's on your mind. That will take the pressure off. And it does. It's a real, or you could, even digitally, you can, drop everything into a digital note. This isn't really thinking. This is just more a case of, I've got to get this off my mind. I'll deal with this idea later. So digitally, it's fine. Whatever way, just get it off your mind, and then you will relax. But forcing yourself to stop is very unnatural. And it creates a tension that your family members and friends would notice.
Yeah. And maybe I'd like to try to recommunicate it. Maybe not try to force to quit, but maybe draw some boundaries so that one doesn't go to a place of burnout where they're working and just moving forward so much that they're not maybe taking care of fitness or hobbies, that sort of stuff. Like it becomes kind of maybe not, I don't know if I want to use the word obsessive, but this is what you're doing all the time, and you don't have other hobbies or things that you're really taking into account as well.
That's one of the, another part of the time sector system was like establishing what is your areas of focus. And these are the 8 areas. We all share them: family and relationships, health and fitness, finances, self-development, lifestyle, life experiences, those sort of things. We all share the same 8. It's just how we define them and what we need to do to keep them in balance is different.
Yeah.
So, I mentioned that Motion app says I should be exercising at 6 a.m. in the morning. I forget that. But the thing is, exercise is still an important part of my daily life. Now, I'm lucky I have a dog and he needs a walk every day. So I've got at least an hour's walking every day. But as you get older, you lose muscle mass a lot faster. So I'm always, every day I'm doing, it's called 5BX. And by the way, I should recommend people to look up 5BX on YouTube. It's a Royal Canadian Air Force fitness program from the 1950s. The late Duke of Edinburgh, Prince Philip, Queen Elizabeth's husband, he practiced it every day of his life from when he left the Navy in the 1950s. He died when he was 97, but I remember he's 99 when he died, but I remember seeing him on his last official engagement when he was 97. And he looked like he was 60 because he was, he was straight. Normally, as you get older, you start stooping a little bit, but he was very straight. He was walking very confidently. And I remember when he passed away, there's loads of articles about him doing the 5BX. And I really recommend go to YouTube and look up 5BX Royal Canadian Air Force, the 1950s instructional video. It's quaint because it was done before, we have all these special effects, but it is just brilliant and simply put together. So I do that every day now. It takes 11 minutes, roughly.
That's all.
Maybe 15 minutes now for me. I tend to, I enjoy it so much, I extend it a little bit. And it's just 5BX stands for 5 basic exercises. So it covers upper, medium, and lower body.
Yeah.
So really I'm doing probably 90 minutes of exercise every day if you include the dog walking. And for me, that's fine. I'm not training to be an Olympic athlete. But that keeps me healthy, it keeps me fit, it keeps me strong. So these things are like, to me, stakes in the ground. They have to be done. And similarly, reading. I absolutely love reading. So my reading time is just before I go to bed. I love to read. And so that's built into my day. Some days I'll read 15 minutes. Some days I might be so tired I only manage 5. But I'm doing at least 15, 20 minutes of reading every day. So these things just get built into your day as stakes in the ground. So you do always have that balance. And so that's a little bit more of the extended part of the time sector system is, there's the balance. There's also like the core work, the work that actually you're kind of paid to do, which has to have time allocated for it. and so on. So yeah, you're right. Balance is very important. I'm a big believer in having a set of strong morning routines that sort of set you up for the day. Now, mine are quite simple. It's like make coffee, drink lemon water, and then write my journal. Journaling for me is just a pure joy. And so I've got 10, 15 minutes of writing. Some days it'll be longer. So I have these like little stakes in the ground that start the day. And I always recommend people, like even with my coaching clients when they first start, is okay, let's look at the structure of the day. Because that's the place to start.
I love that. I'm working with a business coach at the moment, and he talks about, it sounds like a similar idea where he talks about daily deposits. He as like a bank account where you're just constantly putting money in that account. Instead, you're constantly, these are things that have to happen today to reach my goals of where I'm trying to get to and be a balanced person.
Yeah. So a lot of it is just these, like last year, I decided to do a challenge of doing a minimum of 10 push-ups every day. Now, 10 in January the 1st last year, that was actually a struggle. But I noticed by November, 50 was easy. And all I was doing was just focusing on doing the 10. And, you know, round about the middle of January, toward the end of January, I was up to 20. And it was really quite quick, as I probably could have got to 100 if I'd tried harder. But I would just say, no, it's just a matter of turning up every day. This is the way I like to phrase it, is turn up every day and just do it.
It's so powerful. And I think we miss that so often. We think we've got to have this big, lofty goal of what we're trying to accomplish. I got to be able to do 100 push-ups every day instead of just, no, I'm just going to show up at 10 every day. And then by the end of the year, you're halfway to 100 and you weren't even trying to hit that.
Yeah, I ended up with 15,000, just under 15,000 push-ups for the year.
Total.
And the weird thing was, on January the 1st this year, that obligation was over, and yet I just automatically did it. I did 25 on January the 1st. I didn't have to do that. And I have kept it going. So I'm thinking I'm going to end up at 400 straight days very soon.
That's fascinating. Yeah, that's great. We had that reminded me, we had a leaky faucet in our kitchen sink. And so one night I wanted to know how much it would drip. And so I put a pitcher under there. And in 8 hours, it dripped out about a gallon of water. I'm not sure what that converts for your...
I was in the UK before they went metric.
Okay, so it just got me thinking, this power in doing small sets of something consistently, like that's going to add up so tremendously after time.
And exercise is a great way to do that. Is like, you don't have to go and run a marathon tomorrow. You know, just go do what I call it, walk jog for 1 mile. That's day one. Look at where you're going to be on day 300 if you did that every day.
It's just that slight deviation from where you're going to where you could go that makes a huge change. So, Carl, you mentioned core work just a few minutes ago, and that was something I wanted to talk to you about. How would you help someone define their core work and where they're spending that time? And what practical advice do you have for creative entrepreneurs trying to define their core work?
Well, entrepreneurs is always an interesting one because there is actually one critical piece of core work there, which is sales. Because you don't actually have a business unless you have sales. You might have a business plan, you might have ideas, you might have a logo, you might have a website, but if you have no sales, you don't really have a business. So to me, sales is a great example because I did car sales for a little while, and there's a great story about how I think this is where the core work idea came from. I worked with a tremendous salesperson called Claire. She wasn't very tall and she wasn't big in any way. She was very, very slim. But we just called her the Rottweiler because once she got her teeth into somebody, she wasn't going to let go until they bought a car. But that was like one of her unique parts of being a salesperson. She was brilliant. She was just phenomenal as a salesperson. Now, I was in my early 20s back then, and me and the other we had a sales meeting at 8:30, and when that finished about 9, me and my colleagues, we would go outside and we would line up the cars, and we'd make sure the brochure cabinet was fully stocked, and basically anything but selling. Claire, though, every single day, and it didn't register at the time. I wish it did because I probably could have been a better salesperson. But Claire would immediately go to a desk and pick up the phone. And for the next 90 minutes, she was on the phone. I remember talking to her about it. She said, I need to do my follow-ups. Now, for me, follow-ups were, I'll do them later in the day. They weren't I'd do them, but reluctantly. But Claire was on the phone from 9 a.m. until 10:30 every single day, talking to people, following up, even doing cold calls, because she filled that time. That was her sales time, if you like. And then on a weekend, it was really frustrating because Claire was always selling. She would like sell 5 or 6 cars, on a Saturday, 5 or 6 cars on a Sunday. I'm struggling to sell one. But she'd done the work. She'd done that every day, 9 till 10:30. She'd set up the appointments for these people to come in and basically buy the cars. So selling to her looked easy, but it was only easy because she was doing the core work of a salesperson. I need to do my calls. That's number one priority. For me and my other colleagues, it was like, no, the cars have to be lined up. No, the brochure cabinet has to be. That didn't help us as salespeople. So, understanding, first of all, what is it that your job is about? As a salesperson, your job is to sell. It's not to attend sales meetings with your colleagues or calling your sales manager or talking to the admin team. Sure, those need to be done, but they're not the priority. The priority is talking to the customers. I remember, I think Brian Tracy used to say, Jim Rohn, who always used to say, what is selling time? It's when you're in front of the customer. It's not when you're having a sales meeting with your sales manager or when you're, talking to your sales admin team. That's not your job. That's not selling. Selling is when you're in front of the customer. And it really resonated because it brought back that story of Claire, who, as I say, she was a phenomenal salesperson, but it wasn't because she was more talented or anything like that. It's just she understood what her core work was, and nobody interrupted it. And so that's what I mean by the core work is what is the work that you derive your income from? And if you're an employed person, you've got a job description, or if failing that, you're going to be evaluated on something. That's where your core work needs to be. A designer should be doing a lot of designing, drawing, and designing stuff. They shouldn't be in design meetings. Sure, they do need to be in those meetings, but their core work is actually designing. And that's what I mean by core work is what is the actual task at a task level of the work that you need to do that you're going to derive your income from.
Yeah, that's great. I'm trying to think of an example of what would make applicable in my life. I guess as a podcaster with this business, maybe making quality content and quality podcasts would relate in that way?
It would, but probably reaching out to guests and researching guests would be probably, I would consider to be the core work.
Even
because,
higher. I
listen to quite a lot of podcasts, and the ones that seem to do, the ones that really are special and good are the ones where the host has clearly done their research. There's a lot of, I love history, and there's a lot of historical podcasts out there, but probably the best one is something called The Rest is History. It's just two guys, they're having a conversation, but they've done their research. Oh boy, they've done that. Yeah, because now they do they show the video. So before it wasn't, you just heard the voices. Now you can go on YouTube and you can see the video, and they've got paper notes, and they're that thick for a 1 hour episode. And, I'm thinking those guys have done their research before they do this podcast.
Yeah.
But that's what makes that podcast so special. I think it is actually the number one history podcast now.
Okay.
But it's done so well. And there's a good chemistry between the two hosts as well. So that helps.
That's great. In your blog post as well, Carl, you mentioned ADHD as an adult. I've never been diagnosed, but I know that I deal with a lot of symptoms, and it seems like a lot of symptoms line up for me with that as well. One symptom that's common is struggle with time management. So do you think a lot of your work was born out of a need to solve that problem for yourself and for others? Or
I think it probably was.
Yeah.
I think of myself as being very lucky because I went to school before ADHD and autism was a thing. One of my nephews, my brother's son, he was diagnosed with autism, not severe or anything, but slight, I think it was. And my mother actually took him to the specialist when he was diagnosed. And she says, you know what, you were autistic. I said, what do you mean? And she said, everything that was diagnosed with my nephew, you had when you were a child as well. I'm going, okay, but I see this as, I was very lucky because it was not a thing then. So therefore I had to find my own coping mechanisms. And so yeah, I think a lot of what I teach today has come about because I've had to solve these problems. And,
Wow.
ADHD to me now is a superpower because
Mm.
I can get focused. I can go into the zone. The challenge is you don't really want to probably medicate for ADHD unless it's
Yeah.
really severe, then perhaps
Mhm.
medication is going to help. But if you're only slightly ADHD, I wouldn't recommend getting medicated for it because you probably develop coping mechanisms. But it's more a case of
Yeah.
harnessing it and using it as a superpower. So one of my
Yeah.
little tricks is I have an analog clock on my desk. It's just the Braun alarm clock. It's very iconic alarm clock. I have one on both of my workstations because time blindness is a thing for ADHD people. It's like once you go in the zone, you just don't recognize time.
Yeah.
So I find that digital clocks are just a number. So they don't work very well. But an analog clock really does because you can visualize the hands moving. So if I say I need to stop at 11 a.m., I just look at the clock, right, when those hands get to those 12 and the 11, I stop. That really works. That helps me. You can also, if you really do struggle like more severely with time blindness, is set it as an alarm. So using an alarm clock. So like ding, 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 it's 11 o'clock, you got to stop. You also start to relax a little bit then because you've got a backup to stop you from going too far. I found that digital clocks don't work as well as analog clocks. There's a visual element with an analog clock that just works better.
That's fascinating. So I have a timer on my clock, the Be Focused app. That tends to work okay for me, but I tend to still kind of, when it does ding for me to get up or move on, I do tend to just keep on going.
I have a little clock on the screen here, and it's just all I see is 11:06 on my clock.
Mm-hmm.
But the analog clock, it's much more visual. So I can sort of look at that and say, okay, when it gets to 11:30, I need to stop, and I can visualize the big hand getting to 6, and that tells me to stop. And it's also, I see the gap getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Whereas the digital clock, it just doesn't do that for me. I can't visualize the ending.
So, Carl, as we're starting to wrap up, I want to talk about your book, Your Time, Your Way. I haven't read it yet, so I want to give you space to give a call to action and not convince me to read it because I do want to read it, but tell the listener why it would be a great read and just a little bit of what went into that book and what that journey was like for you writing that book.
Well, the book was a 3-year project. Well, I learned something. Anyone wanting to write a book, I can tell you now, writing the first draft is the easiest part. Writing the first 80,000, 100,000 words, that's so easy. That is easy, really. Most people say, no, it's hard. No, that's easy. You wait till you start editing. Oh, that's when it gets tough. So I think I actually wrote the first draft in probably about 12 weeks, maybe, 6 months, say, but 2.5 years of editing.
Wow.
So that's just to give people a perspective of first draft versus, I mean, you'll get, people will call it like first draft, second draft, third draft, fourth draft. I just saw first draft, then edit it. To me, that's how it worked. But it's a 3-year project. But when I set out to do it, I really just wanted to, again, go back to basic principles and write a book that helped people to start from where they're at and give them a better understanding of time, how you can use the time you have to do the things that you want to do. So it starts with, basically COD system, because that's the foundations of everything. Then it goes to like the time sector system. And then there's things like managing your email and also bringing in your goals, and the areas of focus, of course, is in there as well, because it's really important. Once you understand what is important to you in those 8 categories, managing your time is so much easier because you know what's important. Because one thing I've picked up, a lot of people say, I don't really know how to prioritize. What are my priorities today? And start at your areas of focus. That will always tell you what's important to you. Yeah, of course, you're going to get the urgent things popping up. That's a given. And you just deal with them when you can. But that bigger picture is the areas of focus. And the people who have read it now have said they really like the way that it's structured, because it does take you step by step by step. So you're not feeling like, how did I get here? What's happening? It does take you step by step. I would love to say it's everything I've learned, but I've probably learned a lot of stuff since writing that book as well. So there's
Sure,
obviously going
sure.
to be a follow-up at some point. It's a
That's great.
continuous journey, and that's the great thing about time management is it's a very simple subject in terms of time is just, that 24 hours a day. How do we choose what to do in the time that we have available? But this book
Yeah.
will certainly help you to get to that point so that you know each day, these are my priorities. These are what I call, these are my must-do tasks, and these are my should-do tasks.
Did I understand you correctly that it moves like how to do a plan for a bigger project and that sort of
Yeah,
like,
it goes into planning the projects because that's an important part of what we're doing today. The thing is, though, I think this is probably a fault of getting things done, is that we're creating far too many projects.
mm,
Now, I have a terrace outside the office. It's winter here in Korea at the moment, so I don't know what it is in Fahrenheit. I think I did look the other day. It's about 14 degrees Fahrenheit. It's
okay.
very cold. So we don't really
Yes.
sit out on the terrace at the moment. So we close it, we kind of like close it down for winter. And I need to open it up again when the spring starts, which is around about the end of March. Now, I know a lot of people say, oh, well, in GTD world, that's a project because it's 3 or 4 hour job to open it up. To me, it's just a
Mm-hmm.
task. I just
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah.
I've got to open up the terrace. So what do I need to do? Well, I've got all the tools. They're all there to open it up. So I just need to pick a day on my calendar. When am I going to do it? I know it's going to take me a Saturday morning or afternoon. So I just need to pick a day.
Yeah.
So fortunately in Korea, the weather is a little bit more predictable than the UK. So I can sort of say, okay, the weather's going to be good on Saturday. Let's do it on Saturday. Now, in GTD world, no, that's a project. That's a project because you've got to get the tools ready. You've got to do this and you've got to do that. So it's multi-step. And I'm thinking, just open it up.
Yeah.
It's 3. I know what to do. But if I'm going to develop a new course, for example, now I've developed many courses before. I know the process, but it is there is a lot to do. There's like, okay, I've got
Mm-hmm.
to brainstorm ideas for it. I've got to then outline it in a spreadsheet. Then I've got to set a recording day and then an editing day and then marketing and thumbnail design. There's a lot of steps. But when it comes to that is, okay, what's the next step? And the next step would be, let's say I've brainstormed a new course idea. Okay, this now needs to be put into an outline so I know the lessons I'm going to record. I don't need to worry about the marketing at that point because the next step is I need to outline it. That's the only thing I need to do. So my task manager will just have a simple task which says, continue outline of new course. So I'm not obsessed with developing projects because I've done it myself. Was like say, okay, these are the steps of the project. Let's write them all down and get them into a task manager and set dates and whatever. And then you do the
Yeah.
first task, and the next 5 tasks don't need to be done. And
Mm-hmm.
you've wasted so much time trying to plan out the exact steps and put them into your task manager. And then you realize that, again, point A to point B, those 3 steps don't need to be done. So I just focus on what's the very next step.
Yeah, that's interesting because I've really benefited from taking your free course with the COD system, and like I mentioned in the email that I sent you, that was incredibly helpful for me. I'm still trying to master the art of doing, but that's one area that I feel like I'm like, how do I move past collecting one task into like, how do I move a project forward? Like, for instance, building a business around this podcast and helping other people with their podcast.
What's the next step? So that is one of the best questions you can ever ask yourself is what's the next step? Writing the book is a classic example because there's
Yeah.
a lot of stuff going on when you write a book, but in different stages of the book, particularly like writing the first draft, it doesn't matter. And I've had I think I remember one client who spent a year trying to decide what writing tool to use. I said, you could just use Microsoft Word. You don't need to spend, that's a side issue.
Yes.
Get the first draft written.
Yeah.
And so, these things is like always asking yourself, what is the next step? the YouTube video that's coming out this week, I'm dealing with that thorny question of think about tasks. Think about this, like think about going to Jamaica for vacation. These tasks I describe as being very woolly because there's not really a lot you can do. But the way I was thinking about this was, well, if you ask somebody to do something for you and they said, oh, okay, I'll think about it. How confident would you be that they would do it?
Not at all.
Well, it's the same when you write a task in that way, I'll think about such and such thing. It's going to be the first task you sacrifice on a busy day. So it'll always get pushed off. But even with a think about task is, what's the very next action? Well, think about going to Jamaica for vacation. That is, well, okay, that's a research. To me, if I haven't, wherever I'm at, it would be, well, research Jamaica. What are the hotels like? What are the beaches like? What is the nightlife like? There's a lot that's more tangible than just think about. So pick one and go with it.
No, I love that. That is going to be my takeaway for myself personally today, is just what's the next step. I love how simple and direct that is, and it's just go with it.
Yeah, I mean, the think about ones, like think about how I can help people develop their podcast. That's a really interesting one to me, because it's like saying, well, okay, I'm helping other people. So really, I need to create a piece of content around that. Would that be a video? It might be a podcast, a solo podcast, like lessons I've learned building my podcast. It could be that I'll write a blog post and put it on my website. So that would actually be the next step, rather than saying, think about how to help people develop their podcast.
That's powerful. Thank you, Carl. So final question, out of all the resources, your book included, your courses online, what would you recommend to a creative entrepreneur hoping to tackle their dreams and their schedule this year? Out of all the resources that you have, what would you recommend?
I would say always start with cause, because it is the foundation of everything. And once you've got, and I mean, that's a free course as well. So, it's like, it's not going to cost you anything except for maybe 45, 50 minutes of your time. But what it will do is it will just help you to start thinking about, okay, I've got this entrepreneurial mind. I'm just stuff is never stopping, because I know what it's like. It still happens to me. I've been running my business. Well, I've been running my own business since 2009. So it's like 15 years. I know what it's like. Brain does not stop. In fact, going to bed at night is one of the most dangerous things for me, because my brain will just start then. This is one of the reasons I'm lucky that I love history, because I can listen to history podcasts. Now, the history podcasts, the great thing about history professors, they're not usually very animated. So you don't get that up and down voice that wakes you up. So I can listen to something about the medieval times and drift off to sleep, because it'll shut my brain down. But, if you have got that entrepreneurial mind where it's constant stream of stuff you want to look into, you've got to collect it, because it's just like a movie reel. It's just going past and you never see it again. So you got to collect these ideas. And this is how COD will help you. It will teach you, okay, for me, I've got a single note in my notes app called ideas, and it's very long. And I don't care, because the thing is, it's there. And the fear, I think most people have this fear, is that I'm going to run out of ideas. I don't think you ever will, but that fear is always there. So I've got this long list of stuff that I've just thought of. Look, quickly. That's digital, by the way, because my phone is usually with me all the time. I don't necessarily have a notebook with me all the time. So I just quickly get that down. So that's what COD's going to actually help you with, is just get that, collecting it, organizing it, and then figuring out, when am I going to do it?
That's fantastic. Well, Carl, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an enlightening conversation for me, and I'm sure it'll be great for the people who decide to tune in and listen as well.
Thank you. Well, thank you very much for inviting me on.
Yeah. Thank you, Carl. Well, guys, that is a wrap for Carl and I's conversation. I just once again want to give Carl a shout out and a thank you for coming on. That was fantastic, and just truly a blessing to have that kind of a conversation and to be able to learn a little bit more firsthand from someone who spent several decades developing their thoughts and ideas on time management. And it's also just really neat to be able to connect with somebody that's been that impactful over the internet. The internet is such a cool place, honestly. The big thing that I am going to take away from today's conversation that I really appreciated Carl bringing out was the question, what's the next step? So often, like Carl was saying, we just overcomplicate things and burden ourselves with trying to plan too much or trying to make the plan glorious. And so why not just think what's the next step and just focus just on that? We don't have to get so far ahead into the future with our plan. We can literally just build the next step and let things come as they may. I do want to invite you guys to check out Carl's book. There's going to be a link in the description for it. It's like I mentioned in the interview, I've not yet read it, but I am eager to check it out after having this conversation with Carl. I want to invite you guys to check it out with me. If it's something that you want to work through together, hit me up in my Facebook group, The Podcaster's Journey, and I would love to read through it with you, share ideas, and go back and forth. I know that Carl would love from you as well about how his work has impacted your life. So definitely reach out to Carl with your thoughts on his book and work. Until next, guys, I want to encourage you guys to keep up the great work and